Welcome to episode 253 of the Pharmacist Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Newlove. My guest today is Dr. Deeb Eid. He's host of the new RxPOSED YouTube Podcast. It's on YouTube. It's called RxPOSED, RxPOSED, RxPOSED. If you're new to my Pharmacist Podcasters series, welcome. This is only the second episode. Glad to have you aboard. Check out the first one. It featured Ola Latala PharmD. She's the host of the OPA podcast. My guests talk about why they started a podcast, who their audience is, what's in it for the audience, what they, as a host, get out of podcasting, what they want their audience to do with the information from their podcast, where you can find the podcast, and any advice for new podcasters. The purpose of this series is to inspire you to use your voice too. And if you're interested in podcasting, there's room for you in the podcast space. Come join us. It's fun. I can help you get started. I teach a self-paced podcast planning course for pharmacy professionals. It may be for pharmacy professionals, but if you think like a pharmacist, this is a great course for you. You can find a link to the course and a link to RxPOSED YouTube Podcast in the show notes on thepharmacistvoice.com. Just click on the podcast tab and find episode 253. Without further ado, here's my interview with Dr. Deeb Eid. Hi, Deeb. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice Podcast. Good to see you, my fellow rocket.
Kim, how's it going? Thank you for having me on today.
Oh, I'm good. I'm actually just getting over COVID, but It was quite the experience and I'm feeling so much better. I'm glad to be talking to humans again.
Yeah, geez, that's not a fun experience. I think I've had that. I think it was around this time last year, actually, and it was not fun, but I'm glad to hear you're doing better.
Thank you. Hopefully the voice doesn't sound too bad. But one of the great things about podcasting is even if you're not feeling 100%, you can still get on the mic and put out content. So I'm glad you could be with me here today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, we know each other from the University of Toledo College of Pharmacy. I was a speaker at pharmacy camp. You were one of my camp counselors, and here you are all grown up like 10 years later, right?
Yeah, it is crazy how many different people you meet through the pharmacy camp experience at Toledo, and I guess just how many people go through the program and also become speakers for the program. So I'm really grateful that we were able to meet at that camp.
I am too, and I'm really proud of how you've developed. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling my listeners who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to do so. So my name is Deeb Eid. As you had mentioned, Kim, I went to the University of Toledo College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. Go Rockets. Through my journey there, I worked in the community pharmacy setting, working at Kroger Pharmacy for pretty much most of my time at Toledo. And then I also was working in a hospital local there, St. Vincent's, which was an inpatient pharmacy job, and kind of got to know that side of things. After I graduated, I was kind of trying to figure out what pathway to take because there's just so many opportunities in pharmacy, and decided to go a non-traditional route, actually through doing a fourth-year API out in Washington, D.C. So I moved out to Washington, D.C. to be the inaugural fellow/resident with the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board, or some people know them as PTCB, and got a really, really rich experience out there, getting to travel, see different individuals and companies and organizations and what was happening throughout the country on the certification, education, and, even the legal regulatory side of things. Came back home to the state of Michigan, moved to the west side, and I started teaching at Ferris State College of Pharmacy for a few years. And while I was doing that, I was conducting research in kind of the regulatory legal space, was really interested in the topic of, pharmacy technicians administering vaccines. At that time, it was a hot topic, and pharmacists prescribing and that sort of thing. And then had a really cool opportunity to hop over and become on the regulatory team for the Board of Pharmacy Regulatory Affairs team at CVS Health. And so that's where I'm currently at right now.
Thanks for the recap. And I know I'm not your mom or anything, but I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Go Rockets. Yeah,
yes.
You've just done so much. I think that's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you've also become a podcaster. I know you started off with one podcast that was traditionally distributed via, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And now you're on to your second podcast, which is now a YouTube podcast.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what's it called and what's it all about?
Yeah, so really good point. So, right when I actually started out of residency fellowship, I was learning more about the kind of the social media and impact of media on the profession and just kind of generally on the public, and that's when I got interested and started up the first podcast that you had mentioned, which at that time was titled Pharmacy Universe. And I learned a lot in that process. Early on, I really didn't know much about I knew about social media, but I didn't know a lot about podcasting. It was a fairly new concept to me, and it was like, where's pharmacy's place within podcasting? What kind of impact can we have on that side of things? So, I learned a ton through that experience, and then decided recently, just kind of reflecting back and thinking of the opportunities to start up a new venture, which I've titled RxPOSED. So it's RX and then the word posed. So it's kind of a play on words. And so I've come to appreciate the video podcast and just generally speaking, being able to see individuals and, kind of those one-on-one interviews, much like we're doing here. And really what I think you've done a great job with your, with the pharmacist's voice and some of the stuff you've been working on. So I think that inspired me just seeing more people getting into the video podcasting space and looking outside of pharmacy. What are other people out there doing who are, pretty big or pretty influential? And so that's why I decided to start the platform. So it's fairly new. It's been something I've been brewing for, I would say, a couple years, just kind of getting the inspiration, trying to figure out what pathway I wanted to take with it. And so, yeah, it's going to be on YouTube. So we do have a YouTube page where I've just released like a couple, videos that I've been posting a few articles on initially. We're on LinkedIn. We also have an X profile, or also known as previously Twitter. And then the Facebook is not, it's very early stages for Facebook. So again, I'm not trying to spread thin. I just wanted to make sure that whatever I end up posting is in the right place for the right people.
I noticed that there's a big difference between what you did the first time and what you're doing the second time, and not content-wise so much, because it's still in the pharmacy space. But going from audio only to video, it's the next thing. So I was just kind of curious, when you chose this YouTube format, did you have some sort of a solo show or interview show, and what kind of format did you have in mind as far as what's going to happen on the podcast? Or is it going to be solo shows, interview shows? What are we looking for here?
Yeah, really good question. So, mainly, I think to kickstart, it's going to be solo interviews. Not to say that in the future I wouldn't maybe expand it to having, I've thought about doing things like panel discussions or panel interviews. I've also thought about hosting a debate, kind of going into maybe not necessarily politics, but the political side as you see people, do these like different types of debates and pose, some questions or topics for people to go back and forth on. I think that that's a pretty entertaining way as well to get different perspectives. To begin, I am starting out, and I have a few episodes that I've already recorded that are being edited right now with some really cool guests. And my goal really is to interview individuals who I think are either having an impact in pharmacy or healthcare, or have some, hot takes on various topics that are somewhat a little bit more controversial or things that people could go back and forth on. And I think that was a gap that I realized as I, did some of my research in what's out there currently.
You are brave. There's a lot of people that don't take on the tough topics. So I am looking forward to hearing what you've got coming up here.
Thank
When
you.
you say solo interviews, that's just you and one guest, right? Is that
Yes.
what we're talking about? All right.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Do you want to name drop anybody that's coming up, or do you want to keep that a secret?
If you stay tuned, you'll find out. So I have a few episodes that are right now being edited and will be released. I think what I'd like to do is maybe release them in almost like chapters, if that makes sense. So kind of pulling a little bit from like the Netflix or these other platforms where, they kind of make you wait and then they release like a whole like 10 episodes or 5 episodes, and then you got to wait a little bit for the next 5. So I'm just playing around again with some of the different methods that I'm seeing outside of pharmacy and maybe some of those like marketing communication strategies. So yeah, you'll have to wait to find out who the upcoming guests are.
Okay, not a problem.
Yeah.
You started this podcast to take on tough topics in the pharmacy profession. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Mhm.
Who do you want your audience to be?
I think it's probably going to be most applicable to those within pharmacy, right away in terms of like the guests and the topics, those who have practiced, those who are in this profession, maybe students, people who are like trying to get into pharmacy. I do think that one of the goals of my overall, just looking back on the previous podcast versus the new, is maybe trying to hit individuals within the public or even other healthcare professions. So I would like it to be a little more applicable to individuals who are outside of either pharmacy or within, the greater healthcare space. I just think it's important for people who are not pharmacists to also learn about what sorts of things are happening in pharmacy and the controversial topics and things that we're struggling with, and how can other individuals even play into some of these topics that we're struggling with.
Got it. Your audience is broader than just pharmacists, then,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yep.
Got it.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see the comments, see who's listening, see who's
Yeah.
watching. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll be watching for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, what's in it for you as the podcaster?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is actually something that I had to put a lot of thought into, from the previous experience that I had moving into this newer experience. I think what's in it for me really is I really enjoy hearing from individuals and asking them challenging questions, but also just hearing different perspectives on, again, some of these tougher, or even not every question that I'm going to ask is necessarily controversial or tough, but I want to hear different perspectives, but I also want others out there to hear these perspectives. So my goal is to not just interview people who are well known within the profession, but to also give a voice to people who maybe are having a impact behind the scenes that you've never heard of. Someone who's on a board of pharmacy, or who works for an association, or maybe is an everyday practicing pharmacist who really is just involved on a state level, or is doing things within their community. So I think the goal for me is to give a voice to those individuals and show that a lot of people are working on various topics and have perspectives, and it's important to share those with the other public healthcare professions and within our own profession.
Sounds like you're going to satisfy your own curiosity too along the way, right?
Yeah, I love learning. So
Yeah. I believe you're in education, so I think that's a good thing that you love learning.
Yeah, as a former educator, that I think that bug has stuck with me a bit.
Yes, former educator. But yeah, once an educator, always an educator, I feel like.
Yeah. And a learner, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have to be learners as
Yeah.
pharmacists to keep up our CE and know what's going on in the pharmacy profession for sure.
Yeah.
You just told me what you want out of it, but then what's in it for your viewers, I guess, since this is a YouTube podcast? What's in it for them?
Yeah, so I would say what's in it for the listeners would be, hopefully they're going to hear from individuals who they may not be as familiar with. Some people they're probably going to maybe have heard or seen on social media, or maybe even met in person. So you're going to get hopefully a diverse guest list of people out there who have various perspectives. You're going to get some perspectives on hot takes, on things that maybe people don't want to talk about, on social media or in public, or things that are controversial that you may have an opinion on, but you might be interested in what other people's perspectives are or insights to that topic, so that you can become a little more educated on the topic yourself, and maybe things that you've never thought through with that topic. And then the last piece, I believe, is using kind of the video format and moving, I think, more towards the YouTube, is just general accessibility. Like, how many people out there use YouTube or have YouTube or have access to it? So my hope is that, it's one of those things where you can even go in, and what I like to do is, continue to create like shorts and really like cut little clips. And that's where the editing process gets a little bit more complex. Create and capture those moments that maybe if you don't have the time to sit down and watch the full interview, you can at least get an idea of the highlights, kind of like watching like Sports Center or ESPN, where you're getting some highlights, and that might draw you in to want to then sit down and watch, a full episode.
I like that. I have not figured out how to do shorts yet. I'm sure it's easy, but I just have not figured it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of different strategies that you can try, but I think some of them are just they got to be short, number one, and it's got to be, I think, something that is good enough to capture someone's attention to draw them in to want to learn more about whatever it is that is being discussed. So there's a little bit of nuance that you need to use when you're creating some of that content too.
Yes, I look forward to seeing what you do with your shorts because that might inspire me to finally do them too. Yeah. I do like shorts. I like watching them. So
Mhm.
why aren't I doing them? I guess I need to just figure out how to do it. All right. You
Yeah.
talked about basically educating people about the different angles of
Mhm.
topics. You're going to be providing education.
Yeah.
Once somebody who watches your YouTube podcast
Mhm.
gets educated about something, what do you want them to do with that information?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it just depends on the topic. If it's ranging from, admissions in pharmacy school to pharmacist prescribing, right? It just kind of depends on what we're talking about exactly. But I think the call to action would be number one, to just make sure that you're educating yourself on topics that are interesting to you and being able to better understand the 360 holistic perspective on those topics. Number two, is there an action item for you as a listener? Is it something that you're dealing with or that maybe someone in your network is dealing with? And is there something in there that you can pull to be able to take action or maybe share with someone else to help them to take action? And number three, honestly, a little bit of entertainment. I think that, not everything has to all be action or taking an initiative, because some of it's really just going to be more entertaining for people to listen to. And that's where I think some of the things like the debates and maybe having multiple guests on will be, more of that entertainment piece as well.
I'm looking forward to this. I feel like you're building it up. When can we expect to see full episodes, Deeb?
So my goal is to release the first chunk of interviews within the next few weeks here in November. So within the next couple weeks, I just keep an eye out on YouTube, LinkedIn, X, all the different platforms. You're mainly going to see them come out on YouTube initially, but I think the most active that I've been so far has been really LinkedIn and X. Just experimenting with those, and who knows, there may end up being a TikTok or something in the future with just clips and stuff like that. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's where you can repurpose those shorts, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Now, as we start to wrap this up,
Hmm.
I know that you just said that your episodes are going to come out sometime before November 30th, basically.
Yeah.
This podcast episode is going to come out on Friday, the 24th, which is
Okay.
Black Friday. So I have a
Oh
two-part
man.
question for you. You probably know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Number one, what advice do you have for future podcasters?
Mhm.
And number two, since it's Black Friday, what would you recommend future podcasters buy?
Great questions. Number one, in terms of advice for anybody who's looking at the space or even who's in the space, I think it maybe applies hopefully to everybody, but part of it is not overcomplicating the process. I think that that's what I learned initially with my very first launch of the podcast was it can really be as simple as putting down a Word document or a Google document, whatever, a note, and just start writing. What's my goal? What is my vision? Who do I think I would want to be part of this? Is it just a solo? Is it just me? Is it a group, podcast? Is there someone else out there that could be a co-host with me? I think if you just have one brainstorming session, you'll quickly realize, are there things that you still need to figure out versus not? And then the other thing is honestly, you just kind of have to hit go. Like for me, um, I started recording and posting things on LinkedIn. Like if you go on the page, you'll see that I've been posting articles. I've been writing in the meantime, and then trying to record like a short, like 2-minute video that recaps what that article was about. So it doesn't all have to be long form content. I think there is a place for that, and obviously that's my larger goal. But the short form content is also something that can be done pretty quickly. And don't be afraid to start, with those if that helps to inspire you to go to maybe like an interview format or whatnot. Number two, Black Friday. Are we talking what should people buy in terms of just general products? Or are we talking like healthcare specific? What's our parameters?
Let's stick to podcasting here for
Okay.
any new podcasters. What's
Okay.
maybe the number one thing that you would recommend a new podcaster buy?
If it's audio that you're aiming for, a microphone. You can get plenty of high quality microphones for under $50. Honestly, that's where I started out. You can even honestly use your headphones, that the whatever version they are that come with your phone, or if you have a set. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the quality of your audio is something that's not to be taken lightly, because people obviously don't want to hear scratchy audio as they're listening. But just start with something simple, very simple, with a mic. If you need, keep it nice and cheap. And then if you are looking to do video, you can use your phone. You don't have to buy a nice fancy camera, but you can also pick up a webcam, again, for under $50. Honestly, it was going to do the trick. Most of them are 720 or 1080 in terms of their what kind of images you're going to get with those. So I would say those are the two essentials. All the other stuff, the software, the platform, I mean, those are things that you can look at, like, depending on your goals, if is that stuff that you really need or not. I just, again, keep it very simple. But those are the two things I would say Black Friday. If you're looking to get kickstarted, you want to have those for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. Microphones are definitely important.
Yeah.
Webcams, if you're a video person, that's for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How about personally? Anything that you're looking forward to buying on Black Friday?
Right now, as we speak, I'm using a computer that I actually built with a friend of mine a few years ago. So this is actually a gaming computer that I use for all my stuff. So it's a very high-powered computer that can handle a lot. I've never built a computer other than once, and it really wasn't that crazy of a process. But I would say I'm always looking for things that I can improve in my setup. So whether it be for gaming or whether it be for podcasting or video, like I got a new microphone not too long ago. I may end up getting a microphone arm, because mine's a little bit older and makes squeaking noises. So yeah, anything that can help improve this setup, I think those are the kind of the things that I look for, and it depends on what are the deals that they have going.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving season, holiday season. Happy everything. Happy New Year. Thanks for being with me here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast to talk about podcasting. This has been fun. Good to
Thanks,
be with
Kim.
you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too.
Thanks again to Dr. Deeb Eid for being my guest today. I'd like to share a few comments, then we'll wrap up the episode. I've known Deeb since he was a student at UT, and it's exciting to watch a fellow Rocket create content in the podcasting space. That's really cool. If you look at all of the podcasters out there, I don't know how many come from the same school, but Deeb and I do, and that makes me proud to be a UT Rocket. I'm really looking forward to watching his episodes on the RxPOSED YouTube podcast. It is cool. I like it when people get curious about something and then they figure it out. Not just figuring out how to start a podcast, but the content of what he's doing. He's curious about what's going on, how it works, who's involved, and he wants to help all of us see what he sees. I love to learn, and if you love to learn too, check out RxPOSED YouTube Podcast at youtube.com/@RxPOSED RxPOSED. Today, we heard Deeb talk about why he started his podcast, who his audience is, what's in it for them, what's in it for him, what he wants his audience to do with the information after watching his episodes, where you can find RxPOSED Podcast, and advice for audio and video-based podcasters. Today's Black Friday in the United States. That is famously in the United States a day to go shopping. So hopefully he's given you some ideas for what to shop for. Even if it's not Black Friday, when you're a podcaster, you need gear. It's great information. I really enjoyed our conversation, and Deeb inspired me to look into creating YouTube Shorts. That's now on my list of goals for this podcast, the Pharmacist Voice Podcast for 2024. Figure out how to make YouTube Shorts. Thanks, Deeb. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you for listening to episode 253 of the Pharmacist Voice Podcast. Please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes, you'll find a link to RxPOSED YouTube Podcast, social media links for RxPOSED, including Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, a link for Deeb Eid, PharmD, on LinkedIn, Connect with the Man. You'll also find a link to my podcast planning course for pharmacy professionals, my social media links, and more. If you know someone who would like this episode, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, come on back, subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. I'll be back next Friday, December 1st with a drug name pronunciation episode. I love those. Thanks again for listening today. I'll talk to you next Friday.